Must be going soft in my old age. Let's do this lens anyway. So I've used a friction tool to spin that centre retainer loose and tip that out. Pick out the filter, the name ring, that's the filter mount. It holds the lens hood in place too. That bayonet there is for holding the lens hood in place. Here we have the lens itself. 3 screws and washers hold the lens capsule into the body. It looks like this has been serviced before to me. The grease that's I'm seeing there is not something I'm familiar with. Out with the lens capsule. Just checking that. Oh, it's a bit gritty. Grease is pretty awful. Okay, so here's our lens cap, the body. The focus adjustment there is a little bit rough. What's it like? The depth of field pointers move okay. It's just a bit sticky, a bit gritty feeling, like there's dust in there. So, when I service one of these, I lay the parts out in the order they come off so that they can go back correctly. Except for the screws, I know where the screws go, so I don't have to do that. Right, I'll zoom out a bit. Where are we? There we are. Right, so we'll take the... Oh, that's handy. 2 pieces just lifted off together there. But normally they would not. So I'd lift off the back ring. This brass ring that you see here, that's for the rangefinder coupling. It's got a cam surface on the bottom side here. That's dusty and certainly needs to be cleaned and lubricated. Take off the setting ring. Take off this shim ring. Lift off this ring. There's a pin on the bottom there. Has this return spring there. Lift off one of the depth of field pointers. Lift off the little connecting cam. Lift off the separator. Unhook the return spring from this depth of field pointer ring. Lift off the depth of field pointer ring. I'll see if I can get that spring off there. It'll come off without a fight. I'll take it off so I don't damage it accidentally. If it won't come off, I'll leave it there and work around it. Very fine. They're hard to encourage off the post. There it is. Put that to one side. So we have our 2 halves here. You can see that this half, the focus scale ring half, is held in with 4 plates. They're wedge-shaped plates, and I'm just going to remove 3 of those. I'm going to try and avoid having to move this one here. That's the post the spring goes on, so it's got a little slot down the bottom either side for engaging a tool. It's very hard to get a tool in there to engage those slots to undo that, and so if I can avoid having to do that, I will. So I'll take out the screws, take out that little wedge piece. One of them is underneath this separator plate here. So we'll just tip that out. Right, so now it's separated. We didn't need to remove that last one, so that's always a bonus. So looking at what I've got here, it's very dirty and dusty. I'll zoom you in a bit. It's all very dirty and dusty. That will account for the gritty feel. All of that filter's got to come off, and the old grease, and then it'll be re-lubricated and put back together. So, start at the beginning. I'll take this piece, and using a cotton bud and some naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid, I'll clean that surface, get rid of all of that dust and dirt, grit, old grease, anything that other than the original metal part really. This groove is where those wedge shaped pieces lock in, and I'm just running a toothpick around there to clear out the old grease and dust and so forth from that groove. Carefully cleaning around this edge here, that's where the rings for the depth of field pointers run, and if that's got old grease or if it's sticky or it's got any roughness to it, they won't move smoothly, and so the whole mechanism will be stiffer than it should be. Some of these cotton buds I'm reusing. I've just previously used them for cleaning the rangefinder and various other things. They're fine for doing a job like this. Just wiping around the focus scale ring there. Always be cautious when you do that. Depending on what finish was used to put those numbers on, it can always come off when you're cleaning things with a solvent. So it's very important to be sure that the solvent you are using isn't going to eat the scale for you. This piece is equally filthy. The major components here are all made out of aluminium. It's been anodised. It'll have a hard surface, but by the same token the surface is, can be quite abrasive. So it's important that it does get lubrication where it needs lubrication. It's just some bit of filth or something there, I'm not sure what that was. Get that out of the way. It's worth taking your time to get rid of all the dust and dirt, because you can rest assured that if you don't remove some grit, it will reappear instantly as soon as you close the thing back up. and settle somewhere where it'll cause you problems. That part looks good. I'll put the two pieces together and see how that feels. Yeah, there's no undue roughness there, so I imagine that once I've got the lubricant on there, they'll work well. Right, so next, the little wedge-shaped pieces. And their retaining screws. Need to clean those wedges carefully. Like the other components, I want all the old grease and any dust or grit off them. These little wedges have some sort of coating on them. It's green, plasticky looking. I would assume that it's some very low friction plastic. Something equivalent to Teflon or PTFE, I would imagine. Something along those lines anyway. Not necessarily that compound, but something that has similar properties. So I'm going to run some molybdenum paste on that surface there. I'm not putting grease on here. I don't want it to be wet with sticky grease. I just want some surface lubrication at that point, so that the two aluminium surfaces don't gall. I'll run a little bit in that groove because that's where those wedges are going to run back to. That should do. Put these pieces together. Make sure that that wedge there falls into place. Now I might need to get one of these wedges loosely in position first, underneath that brass track. That's fine. So I'll put in the wedge opposite the one we left in there. Put this one in first. And as you will see, those wedges, the mounting holes are slots, so that you can adjust the position of the wedge inwards or outwards towards the centre or away, which controls how much friction you'll get, and also if you don't have it in far enough you'll end up with rattle. So I'm just checking the feel of that. That feels nice and smooth. I'm checking that there's no rattle. Flexing those two components apart, they feel good. So I tighten that screw up. We have this wedge sitting there underneath that brass spacer thing. I'll get that in next. Now these lenses changed over time. This is sort of what I'd call an intermediate version. The first one had 2 screws at each of these stations and wider wedges. The second one was like this, and then there's a third type where this whole business was replaced with a single plastic ring, which was held down with 4 clamps, I think. It was also adjustable in a similar way. But this is sort of the intermediate. They all work in much the same way. The changes would have been made over time to economise the cost of manufacturing, I expect. Since none of it's visible on the outside, it didn't really contribute to the usefulness of the product as far as the consumer was concerned. So it must have been done to make a change to benefit the manufacturer. That's nice and smooth. It's by no means loose. It's a good feel. That's fine. That's done. I'm just going to wipe around some of the external surfaces on this lens because it's a little bit grimy looking. I'll see if I can improve that. So we have the body ready to go there. The focus part of that body is ready to go. Now I can start cleaning and putting back the internal components. So we're just working our way back down the stack really, the pieces that we've removed. And this I can see is quite grimy. So I want all of that off there. I want this nice and clean. Any grease on these components will make them sticky because they're quite wide, flat, broad surfaces. They do tend to, if you get grease between them, they stick together. Right, so this piece, where are we? This piece drops in here. And we need to put our spring back in here now. That was the fine spring. There are two springs on this lens. The fine spring went on this piece. The heavier spring went on the other piece. So I have to get this over the post. Oh, that went on much easier than it came off. Hook it onto over the hook on that ring, and we're ready for the next piece of the puzzle. And the next piece of the puzzle is the spacer ring, which runs, or the separator that runs between the two pointers. And its job is to, because they counter rotate, so it reduces the friction between them. That's quite dirty. Has a little notch in it, and that notch lines up over a pin. This narrow section runs past those gears there, so we know that it drops in here. That spring, of course, has managed to tuck itself under there, so we'll pull that out so it's running around the outside edge. On to the next piece, and the next piece is this little cam. It's like a lever. It's got 3 points on it. One runs on a track in the mount there. A pin fits into one of those pieces, and another part fits over another pin. So we'll just clean that. I just want to get rid of the excess grease. And I'm going to use a little touch of molybdenum paste and just run it in that track that pin follows and put that pin into place. So the larger pin drops into that groove, and this thing just sits in there like that. Our next piece is our other pointer. So I've got to clean the other pointer. This drops into position here. We have to do two things. We have to get the pointer at the end of its track, and we have to get it seated over that pin on that little lever that we'd put in. It's just seated over that lever now. I'll just move this around till it couples correctly. Oh, is it going to do it for me? Will it go one more tooth? It will. Alright, so I'm checking that that pointer is seated, that everything is sitting flat. And our next component is this piece with the pin on it, and the pin couples to that small lever. Again, nice broad surfaces, any oil and grease on them, and they tend to stick and not run freely. So I'm getting rid of all of that. That should be clean. Just a tiny rough spot there. That's a little bit of corrosion, I'd say. That shouldn't cause us any problems. Right, so the pin needs to go into this hole here. So I'll lower this into position. That's not seating properly, I don't know, that's better, it's just dropped into place, and its return spring needs to hook over that same pin the other spring is hooked to. So like that. That all looks good. We're getting near the closing stages now, for this piece at least, and I've got to clean the back part. So we'll just clean these two components, and then I'll dismantle the rangefinder coupling cam. And then we can assemble the whole thing. This last piece here, that has the levers on the back of it that extend out the outside of the lens at the back and couple to the camera. That's good, that's clean. Right, so pop that to one side. Need to deal with this piece next, but I'm going to stop right here and change the battery in this video camera. Right, dismantle this rear piece. This is the lens mount really, this is where it mounts onto the camera body. We have three little retainers and their screws. The body and the brass cam. Well, that's all quite dusty there, so I'm just going to wipe out some of that loose dust. Now, I'll clean these pieces up. I'll clean the outside of the mount for good measure. And clean the inside. The rangefinder coupling cam needs to run smoothly, but if it's assembled dry it tends to rattle a bit in the frame and gives you a chattering effect as it moves. like those infernal chatter rings that the kids used to play with a couple of decades ago. So it certainly needs to have some lubricant on that which stops that chattering effect. Of course, with the little groove at the slot at the back of the lens where this cam is visible means that dust and so forth can enter this, particularly if it's not mounted to the camera at the time. Right, that looks good. So I'm going to put a little bit of molybdenum paste on that cam ring around the outside edge. That's a bit heavy, don't need that much. Which will lubricate it. It'll also add a little bit of drag to it on those broad external surfaces, and that will stop it from chattering. This curved cam surface here is where the pin on the rangefinder couples to on the camera, so I'm just going to run some molybdenum paste on there, just lightly. That'll help that pin track that without any undue roughness. So this just drops back in there. It can go back in any position because we'll be rotating it to where we need it to be shortly. There are 3 little retainer plates which sit on there, each with their screw. It doesn't want to pick up for one reason or another. Let's try that again. That's better. Number 1. The hole in the little bracket that I'm screwing on here is very close to the screw size, so getting everything aligned is a bit tricky. That's it. Finally picks up the hole in the mount and we're away. Number 3. That one went straight in, no arguments. Right, so that ring's in place, moves smoothly, no chattering, just what we want. Now we've got to bring these components together, and I need to find something first.